Men fail with women not because they are weak, unintelligent, or inexperienced, but because from the very beginning they are given a false framework for understanding how relationships work. A man approaches the world through logic, structure, and cause and effect, and this approach reliably rewards him in almost every other area of life. When he studies, works, builds, or competes, clear rules lead to clear outcomes. Effort produces results, mistakes can be corrected, and progress follows understanding. Over time, this trains a man to believe that comprehension leads to control, that if he understands a system deeply enough, he can manage it, improve it, and predict its behavior. This belief becomes foundational to his identity and sense of competence. When he enters relationships, he carries this same mental model with him. Assuming that women operate within a similar logical framework, he expects consistency to be rewarded, communication to resolve problems, and fairness to stabilize outcomes. He believes that listening carefully, explaining clearly, and behaving correctly will naturally produce harmony and mutual understanding. From his perspective, this expectation is not naive or arrogant. It is simply an extension of everything that has worked for him before. The problem is that relationships do not operate under the same rules as logical systems. When the expected results fail to appear, the man does not immediately question the model itself. Instead, he assumes he has not applied it well enough. He listens more carefully, explains himself more thoroughly, and increases effort, convinced that clarity will eventually resolve the situation. This is where confusion begins. The man feels as though he is doing everything right, while the system itself seems to malfunction. He experiences frustration, not because he lacks intelligence, but because his intelligence is being applied in a context where it does not function as expected. Without realizing it, he is trying to solve a problem that does not respond to logic in the first place. This gap between expectation and outcome is the foundation of nearly every misunderstanding that follows. And it is the moment where many men unknowingly begin repeating the same mistakes over and over again. The real misunderstanding begins when a man tries to interpret a woman as if she were a logical system rather than a biological one. He pays close attention to her words, analyzes her explanations, and attempts to adjust his behavior based on what he believes she is communicating. If a conflict arises, he assumes there has been a failure of communication and responds by explaining himself more clearly, clarifying his intentions, and aligning his actions with what he thinks is expected of him. From his perspective, this approach is responsible and mature. However, a woman does not primarily respond to words, consistency, or logical explanations. She responds to emotional signals that operate beneath conscious reasoning. What matters is not what a man says, but what his presence communicates in terms of confidence, stability, and internal certainty. This is why men often feel that women contradict themselves or change their expectations without warning. The man hears one thing and sees another, and he assumes inconsistency or manipulation. In reality, the woman is responding consistently to emotional information that the man is not aware he is broadcasting. His explanations, his need to be understood, and his efforts to justify himself subtly communicate uncertainty. The more he tries to correct the situation through logic, the more he reinforces the emotional signal that something is unstable. This creates a growing gap between what the man believes he is doing and how his behavior is experienced. He feels misunderstood and unfairly judged, while the woman simply responds to what she senses in the moment. Neither side is consciously acting against the other, yet the disconnect deepens because the man is attempting to solve an emotional process with a logical tool that was never designed for this purpose. A woman evaluates situations through sensation rather than reasoning, and this distinction is crucial to understanding why logical approaches consistently fail. Long before conscious thoughts form, she senses emotional cues such as confidence, tension, certainty, hesitation, or internal imbalance. These evaluations happen automatically and are shaped by biological mechanisms that existed long before modern language, social norms, or moral frameworks. A man may believe that his intentions are good and his behavior reasonable, But intention has little relevance if the emotional signal behind his actions suggests instability or self-doubt. This is where many men feel deeply wronged. They are judged not by what they mean, but by what they project. When a man notices emotional distance, his instinct is to repair it by reassuring, explaining, or proving himself. From a logical standpoint, this makes sense. From an emotional standpoint, it does the opposite of what he intends. Each attempt to reassure subtly confirms that something is wrong, that balance has been lost, and that he is reacting rather than leading. The woman does not consciously decide to withdraw. Her response is adaptive. She adjusts emotionally to what she senses, not to what she is told. This creates a painful loop in which the man increases effort while the woman increases distance. He experiences this as rejection or unfair judgment, while she experiences it as a natural response to changing emotional conditions. The conflict is not caused by cruelty, manipulation, or misunderstanding, but by two fundamentally different systems processing the same situation in incompatible ways. Until a man recognizes that emotional signals outweigh logical explanations in this context, he remains trapped in a cycle where his best intentions consistently produce the opposite of his desired outcome. This is why women are so often described as mysterious, unpredictable, or contradictory, when in reality they are highly consistent within their own internal framework. The confusion exists only because men are using the wrong model to interpret what they see. A woman is not an emotional version of a man, nor is she a puzzle waiting to be solved through better explanations, improved communication, or greater emotional effort. She is a different biological system with different priorities and different triggers, designed to respond to signals rather than arguments. Once a man understands this, many of his past experiences begin to reorganize themselves in his mind. Moments that once felt unfair or incomprehensible start to make sense, not because they become pleasant, but because they become clear. He realizes that searching for the perfect words was never the solution, and that no amount of explanation can compensate for a lack of internal certainty. This realization forces a shift inward. Instead of trying to manage outcomes through communication, the man begins to focus on his internal state, his emotional control, and the presence he brings into a situation. He understands that stability cannot be negotiated, and attraction cannot be reasoned into existence. This does not guarantee success, approval, or permanence, but it removes the illusion that logic alone can solve emotional dynamics. Clarity replaces confusion, responsibility replaces frustration, and awareness replaces endless analysis. At this point, the man stops reacting to emotional shifts and starts recognizing patterns. He may not like what he sees, but he no longer feels lost, and that clarity, uncomfortable as it may be, is the foundation for any real understanding that follows.